how do you build a nation from scratch? I mean, not just with buildings and roads, but with laws, with a shared identity. Well, the book of Deuteronomy gives us something amazing. It's basically a blueprint for the nation of Israel as they were about to start over in a new land. And today, we're going to dig into it, not as just some dusty old list of rules, but as a real, carefully thought out plan for a brand new society.
So we're going to break this blueprint down into 4 main parts. First up, how they were supposed to connect with God. Then, how they were supposed to treat each other, the justice system. Third, their rules for war. And finally, how they handled the really tough stuff, the big life and death questions.
Okay, let's jump right into that first pillar, because before you can have a nation, you've got to figure out its core identity, its spiritual foundation. This part of the blueprint lays out the entire leadership structure for ancient Israel's relationship with God. And right off the bat, there's this really interesting split. You've got all the tribes of Israel, and they're all getting a piece of the land. Except for one. The tribe of Levi, the priests, they're set apart. They don't get any property. Their inheritance was going to be something totally different. So you're probably asking, well, how are they supposed to live? Instead of farming, their entire support system was woven directly into the nation's worship. They received a share of the sacrifices, the first pick of the grain, the wine, the oil, all of it. The idea was that God himself was their inheritance, and the people's devotion was how he provided for them. Now, to keep this unique spiritual system pure, the blueprint was crystal clear about outside influences. It completely outlawed all the common religious practices of the nations around them. Things like divination, witchcraft, trying to contact the dead, all of it was off limits. There could be no confusion about who they worshipped. But listen, it wasn't just about the priests. Moses drops his huge promise on them. He says, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me, from your own people. And when he speaks, you have to listen to him." This was a direct line of communication, a promise for future guidance. And this is where it gets so fascinating. This prophecy is seen as having a double meaning, In the short term, it's absolutely talking about Joshua, the guy who takes over right after Moses. But in the long view, it's understood to be pointing all the way forward to an ultimate prophet, with Jesus being the final fulfillment of that promise. Of course, if you're going to have prophets, you need a way to spot the fakes, and the stakes were about as high as they get. The test was simple and direct. Did their prophecy come true? Did they lead people toward God or away from him? If someone failed that test, they were a false prophet, and the penalty was death. It was that serious. All right, on to the next pillar of the blueprint. A nation needs more than just a spiritual core. It needs a working justice system for day-to-day life. This part of the plan is all about fairness, protecting the innocent, and keeping society in order. Now check this out. This is one of the most brilliant legal ideas in the whole thing. The city of refuge. Just think about it. In that culture, a death, even an accidental one, could kick off an endless cycle of revenge and blood feuds. This system was designed to hit the brakes on all of that. If you killed someone by accident, you could literally run to one of these special cities and be safe until you got a fair trial. And to make sure innocent people weren't wrongly convicted, the bar for evidence was set really high. You couldn't convict someone just because one person said they did it. Nope. You needed 2 or even 3 separate eyewitnesses to confirm any charge in court. And this leads us to that famous phrase, life for life, eye for eye. Now, we often think of this as just brutal revenge, right? But in this legal context, it was about something else entirely. Proportional justice, specifically for false witnesses. Get this. If you lied in court to try and get someone executed, for example, whatever punishment you were trying to dish out, that's what would happen to you. The penalty had to perfectly match the crime you intended. Okay, let's dive into the third pillar. Every nation has to deal with conflict, right? Well, this blueprint laid out very specific rules of engagement for how Israel was supposed to handle war, trying to balance military needs with other important values. And what's really amazing are the exemptions from military service. Before a battle, they'd make an announcement. Did you just build a new house? Go home. Just plant a vineyard? Go home. Just get engaged? Go home and get married. They wanted people to enjoy these huge life moments. And get this, even if you were just plain scared, they sent you home too.
Now, the rules for war were not one size fits all. There was a huge distinction. When they approached a city that was far away, the very first thing they had to do was offer terms of peace. But for the Canaanite nations already living in the Promised Land, the instructions were, well, drastically different. So, why the harsh command? The reason given in the text is explicitly religious. The whole point was to prevent Israel from being corrupted by the idolatrous practices of the Canaanites. It was seen as this massive spiritual threat that could rot the nation from the inside out.
And even in the middle of a brutal military siege, the blueprint includes this incredibly practical long-term rule. It says you can't just chop down fruit-bearing trees to build your siege ramps. Why? Because those trees are a source of food. Destroying them hurts everyone in the long run, even the winners.
All right, on to our final pillar. And this is where the blueprint gets really personal. These laws tackle some of the most difficult and painful situations any society has to face: unsolved murders, intense family conflicts, and even how to handle the dead. So what happens if a body is found out in a field and nobody has a clue who did it? The blueprint lays out this very specific, very solemn public ceremony. It involves the town elders and a young cow. The point wasn't necessarily to find the killer, but to publicly cleanse the entire community from the guilt of that unsolved murder. And every single part of this ritual was packed with meaning. The heifer, which had never been put to work, represented an innocent life taken. The flowing water was a symbol of washing away the community's guilt. And the whole public act sent a powerful message: we take this death seriously, and the hidden killer will eventually face justice. The laws also reached right into the home. For example, it protected the inheritance rights of the firstborn son, even if his father didn't favor his mother. It set up a formal judicial process for what to do with a son who was completely out of control. It even had humane rules for marrying a woman captured in war, giving her rights and a month to mourn her family. And finally, there's this law about public execution. The body of an executed criminal was seen as being under God's curse. And leaving that symbol of the curse hanging overnight was thought to actually defile the Holy Land itself. So the rule was clear: burial had to happen that very same day. So there you have it. From their spiritual authority and justice system to the rules of war and family tragedy, Deuteronomy lays out this incredibly detailed blueprint for a nation. When you look back at all these foundational principles of justice, mercy, holiness, and purity, what do you think? Which of these ancient ideas still feels the most powerful and relevant in our world today?